Hello, it's me, Ariza Gaming, and welcome back to another episode of Sandbox Showcase, a series where I talk about problems in Oxygen Not Included and how you can solve them easily and effectively. So today I want to talk about salty geysers and how you can exploit them for profit. Power, water, salt, you can have it all with these geysers. So why do you want salt, first of all? Salt is a resource in Oxygen Not Included that you can crush into sand and bleach stone via various machines. Sand is a filtration medium that is very useful for running water sieves, deodorizers, and other filtration equipment. And you can also use salt directly in rust deoxidizers to actually convert rust and salt into iron ore and oxygen. So that gives you metal ore and oxygen for your dupes to breed. So this is very important. And these two geysers, the saltwater geyser and the cool salt slush geyser, are both renewable sources of this salt, which means they're renewable sources of sand and they're renewable sources of bleach stone. So being able to harvest them in an efficient way is pretty important. So first of all, let's talk about the two geysers and what the differences are. So the regular saltwater geyser erupts with salt water at 95 degrees C. So this is very hot. It's going to scald your dupes if they walk into it. And if you separate it out, then you're going to end up with hot water that you would probably want to run through an electrolyzer or oil wells. And the salt water itself is about 7% salt. So 7% of the mass will be salt. And as a result, the liquid has slightly different properties than normal water. It freezes at minus 7.5 degrees C, and it evaporates at 99.7 degrees C. And the specific heat capacity is a little bit lower at 4.1, which is not a huge difference. The brine, on the other hand, that comes from the cool salt slush geyser, this comes out at minus 10 degrees C, so it's actually very cold right off the bat. You can use this geyser without any modifications to cool down your base, very handy to find in the early game. And the brine that actually comes out of it is 30% salt when you filter it out. So as a result, the freezing point is minus 22.5 degrees C, which is considerably colder. And the evaporation point is also higher at 102.8 degrees C. The specific heat capacity is also lower again at 3.4, so it's not going to retain as much heat as regular water or salt water. So these two geysers are a little bit different. The saltwater geyser erupts usually about 5 kilograms per second as its eruption average. That goes down to about 3 kilograms per second, factoring in a dormant period. And the mean amount that it actually erupts while it's fully erupting is around 10 kilograms per second, but this can vary considerably as it does with all geysers. But the mean overall output while it's erupting is 5 kilograms per second. And the cool salt slush geyser erupts half that. Its average eruption value is 2.5 kilograms per second. Its average total throughput, including dormancy, is 1.5 kilograms per second. And you would expect its actual eruption value to be 5 kilograms per second. This is a particularly active brine geyser that produces 14 kilograms per second. But the eruption period is a lot shorter, so the eruption average is still the same at 2.5. So the cool salt slush geyser produces half of the liquid that the regular saltwater geyser produces. But because the brine is 30% salt instead of 7% salt, you actually get twice the amount of salt out of harvesting and harnessing this brine geyser than you do out the saltwater geyser. And this is going to change how we approach extracting the resources from these geysers. Now, you can just use regular salt water to feed water weeds. The water weeds stifle at about 65 degrees C, so you're going to need to cool it down a bit if it's coming out the geyser at 95 C. But for the most part, I'm going to assume that you're trying to separate the water and the salt, because both water and salt are very important resources for their own reasons in this game. And if you really want water weeds, you can wild plant them with pips and not have to feed them salt water. And the brine, you can't feed to plants. But yes, you have a few different options with these geysers. You can just run the material through a desalinator, which is a building in the refinement tab. We'll just bring it up here quickly, just to give an overview of all these different ways you can handle these geysers. So this desalinator, it uses 480 watts of power, and it can take in 5 kilograms per second of liquid, either brine or salt water. You can also feed it clean water and polluted water, and they'll just go in the input and they'll come out the output, and they won't damage the machine. So you can pump in mixed water here, and it will just filter all of the salt out and pump the rest of the water products out. So that's pretty convenient. It does produce a fair amount of heat, 8 kDTUs per second when it's running. So you'll want to make it out of a conductive material if it's constantly being used so that it doesn't overheat. It has a normal overheat temperature. And your duplicants are going to have to periodically take the salt out of the storage. This thing can store up to 1 ton of salt before it needs to be manually cleaned out by a dupe. And interestingly, an auto sweeper won't work for this. It's an errand that a duplicant has to actually do on the machine to get the salt out. So you can't have this on an asteroid where there aren't any duplicants. But it's generally a pretty good system solution to sort out filtering these geysers. But what I would say is it's preferable to use it with the brine geyser because the liquid throughput is typically lower. It's typically half that of the saltwater geyser. And the machine uses power based on the liquid flow rate. So it's going to be more power efficient to use a desalinator on a brine geyser than on a saltwater geyser, where you're getting relatively little salt out as well. But one desalinator can handle the eruption average of 1 saltwater geyser or 2 cool salt slush geysers. But you do have some more options. There's a new building that has been added called the Geotuner, which is in the Stations tab. So we can go and have a look at this. And this building uses 120 watts while the geyser is active. Your duplicant has to come and do a research errand on it, and they have to fill it with a material which is consumed while the geyser is erupting and the data from the research errand is being consumed. So in this case, it's Bleach Stone for water sources. So you put a little bit of Bleach Stone in this. Over the total average, including the dormancy periods, you would expect this machine to use about 25 grams per second of Bleach Stone continuously. Uses 83.3 grams per second while the geyser is actually erupting. And again, the more spiky the geyser is, in that if the eruption period is shorter, the Geotuner is more material and power efficient than it would be if it has a more average eruption period or a higher eruption period with lower downtime. So bear that in mind. But yes, you can use this Geotuner. Each Geotuner that is active on a geyser will increase the throughput by 20%, and it'll also increase the temperature of the output by 20 degrees C. And you can have up to 5 Geotuners in a room, all working on the same geyser, and it's going to double the geyser's output quantity of material, and it's going to increase the temperature by 100 degrees C. And this is where we get the interesting part coming in. So with a brine geyser, you can heat this up all the way to 90 degrees C with Geotuners. And because the brine is 30% salt, you can use a machine called a Bleach Stone hopper to turn the salt into 3 parts salt into 1 part Bleach Stone and 2 parts sand. This machine uses a lot of power. It uses 480 watts, and it can handle 30 kilograms of sand. No, it can handle 30 kilograms of salt every 40 seconds. So the average watts per kilogram for the Bleach Stone hopper is about 640 watts per kilogram of material processed, compared to 96 kilograms for the desalinator. So this uses a fair amount of power, but you do get Bleach Stone out of it. And the key thing is, if you geotune a saltwater geyser, you're only getting very slightly less Bleach Stone out of the increased throughput after you put the salt in the Bleach Stone hopper than you consume using the Geotuner. So essentially, it's almost free, aside from the power, to geotune a saltwater geyser. And because you're increasing the temperature by up to 195 degrees C, you can actually run this through a steam turbine and generate a considerable amount of power. If you have enough Geotuners active, the whole system will be power positive, and it will consume hardly any of the Bleach Stone compared to what is generated by the increased throughput. So this could be a very powerful build that you can harness as soon as you have access to steel and plastic to get a load of power, a load of free water, and a load of sand, and keeping the same amount of Bleach Stone you'd have had from processing the salt water in the first place without geotuning it. So potentially very powerful. And with the brine geyser, because it's 30% salt, you actually get about 50% more Bleach Stone than what you put in if you geotune it with 5 Geotuners. So if you don't need the cool water for just cooling down your base, you can get a very large amount of bleach stone that you can use to geotune the rest of your water sources without feeling guilty. You can geotune your water geysers, your cool steam vents, your hot steam vents, your polluted water vents, you name it. Using the extra bleach stone you get from geotuning your cool salt slush geyser. And this is very important. This is going to let you geotune all of your water sources if you have enough of these. And once this brine gets up to 90 degrees C, you can just heat it up a little bit further with something like a Thermo Aquatuner. And you can either, instead of running it through a desalinator, you can either boil and condense it to separate out the water and the salt that way. Or, again, you can run it through a steam turbine. And what I'm going to do for the rest of this video is I'm going to discuss the 4 different options I would generally go with in handling these geysers in one of my playthroughs. The first will be just leaving the cool salt slush geyser output cold and using it to cool down items in your base. The next will be geotuning it 5 times and processing the hot brine with a desalinator, which is still viable for the brine geyser. The next will be setting up a condenser using a Thermo Aquatuner that boils the brine and condenses it into water in the same room, so you don't need to run a desalinator and you get a little bit of extra cooling from your base from the Thermo Aquatuner running, while consuming about the same amount of power overall as the desalinator. And then finally, I'll talk about using steam turbines, particularly with saltwater geysers, to generate a load of power and a load of free water. So first of all, let's talk about how you can set up an infinite storage for your cold liquids. I typically recommend setting up infinite storages for cold liquids, because that way, if they breach containment somehow, you're not just flooding your entire base with a hot liquid that's going to scald your dupes and kill them, or melt all of the items in your base. You can do it with hot liquids. We've done this on our Twitch run with Badlands Boffins with liquid sulfur, but it's generally a lot safer with cold liquids, so I think this is a pretty good case to show you that design. So, what we're going to do, first of all, analyze the geyser. You want to analyze it so that you can geotune it later if you want to, and so that you know when it's going to go dormant. Next, we're going to put in some manual airlocks. You can use airflow tiles for this, but I prefer to put in manual airlocks so your dupes can get in and build everything while they're setting everything up. And you're going to want to pick a moment where the geyser is dormant to build all of this, so it's not erupting liquid while you're setting it up. That's very important. So we'll put some manual airlocks in here. It doesn't matter too much what you make them out of, because this is a cold liquid. If you're making it out of a hot liquid, you've got to make it out of something that's not going to melt from the hot liquid. So be very careful if you're looking at something like magma for one of these. So these will not take any pressure damage when we store very large amounts of liquid in this space. The neutronium also won't take any pressure damage, which is why we're building the infinite storage directly underneath the geyser to save space. So we'll put that in, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put in some insulated tiles. You can double wall this if you want to make sure there's absolutely no heat transfer. We're just going to single wall it for now. So you'll put that here, and then what you'll do is you'll take some more insulated tiles, you'll put them around here, and you'll lead them up here so that there's a 1-tile gap where your dupes can climb down and access everything. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill these columns here with 3 different gases. And that is going to form an Escher waterfall, which will allow the liquid to pour from the geyser into the storage and infinitely pressurize it, because the liquid can't push past the gas this way, but it can push past it this way because of how gas physics works in this game. Obviously not very realistic, but very handy for us. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to set up a vacuum in the room. So I would recommend putting in a normal T liquid lock, say here, that your dupes can access. You do need to leave this tile in here to prevent the gas from exchanging into this area. The gas needs to all be blocked in here by the liquid from the geyser erupting, and you need to make sure that it doesn't, once it's set up, no one comes in and mops up this liquid. That's very important. So to set up this normal liquid lock, we'll put in some bottle emptiers. It doesn't matter too much what you use for this liquid lock, because you're going to vacuum all of this and there's not going to be any heat exchange. Make sure to use a liquid that's not going to off-gas. You can actually literally just use a little bit of brine from the geyser to do this, so I'll just recommend we do that in this case. And just put in a little bit in each of these bottle emptiers, and if we play it, that will drip down, and it will form a vacuum here, which will thermally isolate the whole room as well. It's a pretty good safety measure to have in general. You can fill it with more liquid though, because we are going to vacuum out the whole room in general. So And remove those bottle emptiers. We can put in a gas pump. Doesn't matter what material you make this out of again. And hook it up to some power, hook it up to a gas vent, and just vent the whole room. So we're gonna remove all of the gases in here. And again, you should do this when the geyser is dormant, so there shouldn't be any liquid there to start. So we'll just check. There's no gases in the room, so we'll unpause it. We have a stable vacuum. So there you go, that's good. You can leave the pump in. You probably should leave the pump in, because if any gases get up here at any point, the build's broken and you need to fix it. So we'll do it like this. We've got 2 columns here. I like to have 2 columns here. A, because it's symmetrical. And B, because if one of the Escher fountains fails for whatever reason, or Escher waterfalls fails for whatever reason, one of them will still work and you can block the other one off temporarily. That way you're not completely screwed if one of them breaks for whatever reason. But they shouldn't break if you set it up correctly in the first place. So, you're going to want to put in your liquid pump that you're going to use to get the brine out. We're not just going to store the brine here forever and not use it. It doesn't matter what material you make your pump out of. What I would suggest is, if you're going to pipe the liquid out, you can pipe it out this way, or you can pipe it out this way. It doesn't matter too much. I'm just going to pipe it out this way. You want to make sure the liquid isn't going to freeze in the pipe under any circumstance, or boil in the pipe under any circumstance, but it shouldn't do this for cold brine. So it's going to go up here. And then you'll want a power wire for this as well, so we can just hook this all up with a conductive wire. There's no real issue. But if you're doing this with hot liquids, you've got to make sure that it's whatever you put in this space isn't going to cause your hot liquid to condense into debris or tiles or something. It might be worth preheating some of this area before the liquid erupts into here and the geyser activates. But this isn't relevant for the brine geyser. I'm just telling you this in general. So you can hook it up like that. And then what I would also recommend we do is we actually set up a thermo sensor in here. So we're going to do this because ungeotuned brine is going to come out at minus 10 degrees C. And if we actually put it in a desalinator, so if we just put the desalinator up here, then the minus 10 degrees C brine is going to turn into minus 10 degrees C salt and water. That water is immediately going to freeze into ice, and it's going to break the pipe. So you do want to heat this up to at least about negative 2.5 degrees before you pump it. So that's what this is going to be for. I guess minus 2. Yeah, minus 2 will be fine. So that's going to go like that. Now we're actually going to put the gases in this area. But what you want to do, is you want to put in some gas bridges. This is temporary, so don't worry about heat leaks for now. These gas bridges are going to go in here, and you're going to have gas pipe segments. You're going to have 3 different gas pipe segments. The bridges will ensure that gas can flow from your gas sources onto the pipes in this room. And for our gas sources, we're just going to set up 3 dev pumps. Let's see, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. We're going to stack these gases in order of density. You want the heavy gas on the bottom, the light gas on the top. So I would typically recommend using carbon dioxide, the bottom gas, because it's heavy and you have easy access to it. Oxygen can be the middle gas, and then I would recommend using hydrogen for the top gas because you can get it from your spom, and it's very light. So we're just going to hook that all into here. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to send a pipe this way. This pipe is going to go over here. And then we're going to put in a little bridge. Just connect it over to the other side. If you're only doing one Escher fountain or one Escher waterfall on one side, the piping won't need to be as annoying as this. It's up to you whether you want to do one side or 2. It doesn't make a huge difference. But something like this is going to make sure the gases get to where they need to get to properly. So we'll let these gas sources produce. Got pink up top, blue in the middle, and black on the bottom. And again, if for some reason you have easier access to other gases, you could do it a different way. So we'll just let all these gases build up. And then if we look at the tiles, you'll see they contain 1 kilogram of each gas. So that's good. This is all set up. So then what you're going to want to have happen is you're going to want your geyser to actually erupt. So we're going to simulate that by just putting a little bit of brine out here. So the geyser's going to erupt, and then it's going to start filling up in here. So let's say it fills up with about, what, 100 kilograms per tile? So that liquid's all going to come in here. It's going to accumulate in these bottom tiles, and it's going to gradually drain out of these top tiles. And what should happen after the first eruption is you're going to have some vacuum tiles up here. It depends on the flow rate of the brine geyser. In this case, we're getting just shy of 2,000 kilograms. So it won't quite fill up these tiles. And you'll end up with 2 vacuums in here and a very small amount of brine in these tiles. Now, notably, it's less brine than if you actually... it's less brine than the amount of gas in the pipe. So when you get a duplicate to come in here and deconstruct the pipe between eruptions, it should just move the brine out of the way or delete it, and it's not going to be an issue. So to show you what to do, let's start by putting a duplicate in. So this very fortunate duplicate is going to go here. Hello, Ellie. So we're just going to get Ellie to deconstruct each of these pipe segments, and I'm just going to show you that it doesn't matter too much what order you do it in. So we're just going to get Ellie to deconstruct the 6 pipe segments, and that's it. Right, let's look at this. So she's deconstructing the hydrogen pipe first. The hydrogen will be blocked by the liquid here, so it will only fill this region. That's good. Then she'll deconstruct this middle pipe down here, and the oxygen will come out. That will push the hydrogen back into this tile. So we've got the full kilogram of hydrogen up here, and we've got the full kilogram of oxygen down here. And lastly, she's deconstructing the carbon dioxide tile, and what that will do is that will actually push the brine out because it's more mass than the brine. And now you've got all 3 gases in the correct order. It looks a bit like Neapolitan ice cream. And this is stable, and the liquid will flow through here one way. And you'll see she's doing the exact same thing here again. I would recommend doing it from top to bottom. You can queue up separate errands if you want, but you can see it clearly works this way. And now the setup is complete. So if we actually fill this with a very, very large amount of brine, we'll just fill this with a very large amount of brine down here, and we'll set this to minus 10 degrees C, because that's the temperature it's going to come out as. So that's all going to go there, and you'll see if we unpause it, the brine doesn't actually go anywhere, even though you've got like 10,000 kilograms per tile. It can't push its way up through the carbon dioxide, but it can push its way down, and this allows you to infinitely pressurize your liquid pump. So this geyser can erupt for thousands of cycles, and all the liquid is going to be stored here, which is great. It's absolutely what we want. It's going to... the amount on each tile is going to fluctuate a fair bit, but that's not going to cause any issues. These manual airlocks won't break. These neutronium tiles won't break. It's all good. And at that point, you can just actually remove the rest of the gas pipe. So we'll just go ahead and do that. So we've removed all the gas pipes, and now you've got the vacuum up here. You've got the 3 gases in order here. And when this geyser erupts in a few seconds, we'll see it just continue to flow in here and pressurize these tiles. So that's all good. So what you can do, once you're at this stage, you need to make sure that your duplicates aren't going to open these doors at any point. Otherwise, the liquid's all going to burst out and it's going to start breaking everything. So make sure you lock these before you do anything with this. We're just going to remove Ellie because we've done this in slightly the wrong order. But you want to lock all of these. You might even want to put a pneumatic door here to restrict access. That's also a fairly valid thing to do. And now we've got the cold liquid. So what we could do is, say we've got a hot liquid that we want to cool down. Let's say we've got some oil over here. So brewed oil. What we can do is we can feed this in with a liquid pipe. We can run a radiant liquid pipe. Aluminium is a good metal for this. It's very conductive. That can just run through these manual airlocks. It can help making the manual airlocks out of something conductive as well. Making them out of steel is pretty good for this. You can just bridge that. You can just send this through here, and then again just have some regular pipe come out of the insulated tile, and then that's going to cool down your liquid. So we just unpause this. You'll see we've got a little bit of water in here at first. Great. So that's going to cool down in the brine. And is this water going to freeze? I guess that's the real test. No, it's fine. Okay, good. And now this hot oil is coming in at 76 degrees, and it's cooling down in the brine, and it's coming out much colder. So this way you're able to take the heat from whatever you're moving in here and dump it effectively into the brine. And if you store up a lot of brine here, it's going to take a while to heat up, so you can dump plenty of heat into this. So there you go. You can cool all of these different things simultaneously with your brine. You can see that the geyser is erupting at minus 10 degrees C. The liquid is all flowing from the actual neutronium where the geyser is into the storage. No pressure damage, no mishaps, no messiness. It's all good. So, as discussed before, this building uses 480 watts. It processes 5 kilograms per second of liquid, so it's going to be 96 watts per kilogram processed. It generates a fair bit of heat, so make it out of something conductive if it's not in a conductive atmosphere. And you will want to have your duplicants have access to it so they can remove the salt periodically. It will store up a ton of salt, and then it will have an errand. It will stop running. The water will just flow through it, and the duplicant will need to empty the machine. But there is an alternative to this. You definitely want to use a desalinator when it's cool. You just need to make sure it's heated up a little bit first. But one of the best ways of actually heating up this cool salt slush geyser is with the Geotuner, as we discussed. So let's talk about that now. So this is a station. It does require being in a laboratory. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a room over here. So there we go, 20 by 4. So we'll take our Geotuner, which is here. I'm just gonna put 5 of them in the room. And then we're going to put in our light sources. So we're just going to put in some duplicate motion sensors. You want these to overlap with the automation ports down here for each Geotuner. So in this case, we can have 3 sensors, and these 2 cover 2 each. And then we'll just put a lamp up here. And then we can just hook this all up to the same conductive wire. There you go. So that's all hooked up. You want to put some automation wire here so that the lights only activate when your duplicants are in here doing the errand. It will give them the lit workspace bonus, which is a 15% boost to the speed, but the main thing that's going to be important is your duplicants' researching attributes. The higher that is, the quicker they'll do the geotuning errand. So when you've got the geotuner in the room and you've got the powered light source, it will show up purple on the room overlay. It'll be a laboratory, and you can now use the geotuner. The maximum room size is 120 tiles, and the minimum room size is 32 tiles. And you can't have any industrial machinery in the room. You can have auto sweepers and whatnot, but no industrial machinery. So, you select the geyser, which has been analyzed, that you want to geotune. You put it in here. And then the duplicants will come and activate the machine. They'll select the geyser, so Ari's going to come do this now. You'll see when they're doing it, it makes it makes a very cute noise. Okay, I guess it's not that cute in this case because it's a saltwater geyser, but it makes a distinct noise. It's different for each geyser. This is very important. So when that's set, it needs experimentation. So your duplicant needs to do a research errand, and you need to put some material in. In this case, you need to put in 50 kilograms of bleach stone, and that is going to last for one continuous cycle of geyser erupting. When the geyser is erupting, the building will consume 120 watts power, and it will consume 83.3 grams per second of bleach stone. And again, the spikier this geyser is, like this geyser erupts a lot for a very short period, you're going to use less bleach stone and less power to geotune this. So you always want to prioritize geotuning geysers that have short eruption periods and high throughputs. So we've done all of that. The next question is where we're going to get the bleach stone from. Well, you can find it on the map, you can find it in jungle biomes, you can find it in ocean areas, I think. Citation needed. And you can find it in space. But in this case, with the brine geyser, the main thing you're going to want to do is actually get it from the salt that you're producing from the desalinator. So we'll put in the bleach stone hopper. Where is it? Here it is. So this building uses 480 watts. It produces 3k DTUs of heat, which is not too much. And we'll just spawn in some of the resources so you can see what the recipe looks like. So we've spawned in some salt and we've spawned in some gold. So this machine will take 30 kilograms of salt and 500 grams of refined gold metal, and it will output 10 kilograms of bleach stone and 20 kilograms of sand after 40 seconds. Now, to get the gold, you will either need a gold volcano, or you'll need to use a metal refinery or a rock crusher on some gold amalgam, which you can find in a marshy biome. But the amount of gold required is so low, if you have any realistic source of gold production, this isn't going to be a huge issue. And the effective throughput on this is 0.75 kilograms of salt per second. So the overall power usage of this machine is 640 watts per kilogram handled. So in this case, with the brine geyser, this bleach stone hopper is going to be using a lot of the power of the overall setup compared to the desalinator and the geotuners. So we'll just queue this up, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set up an auto sweeper in the area. So we're going to fill this with the materials, but the auto sweeper is for the bleach stone hopper, because what actually happens is, okay, well that's not very handy. What actually happens is, after the 40 seconds, the machine erupts the bleach stone and the sand in an area around the hopper. So you're going to need an auto sweeper to collect it into a conveyor loader. And you're going to want to do this because it all comes out as little debris, and you don't want your duplicates to be constantly picking it up and doing stuff. So we'll set that up in a minute. You will also want to hook up a timer sensor to this, because every 40 seconds when this happens, it will erupt for a few seconds, and the auto sweeper is just going to be picking up lots of little blobs of material. So what you'll do is you'll set up a timer sensor with this, the auto sweeper. And you want to set this to something like green 10, red, say 80, and then it's going to pick up a large amount of material at a time. So there you go. So now it's doing the errand. You can see the material is shooting out of the bleach stone hopper. So we'll set this to pick up the bleach stone. And the sand we're just going to leave on the floor for now, but you'll want to send that wherever you're processing your sand, your rock crusher, whatever you, or not your rock crusher, your water sieve, your deodorizers, whatever you want it to go to. So now the bleach stone is going to go in here, and the thing about bleach stone is it off-gases chlorine. If the gas pressure is low enough, it will slowly convert to chlorine. So you want to get the bleach stone out of there fairly quickly, and you want to send it to somewhere that's heavily pressurized with either gas or liquid so that it doesn't off-gas. In this case, the whole map is full of a load of oxygen. I don't recommend doing this because your dupes will have popped eardrums. But what you can do is you can set this up in an area with Atmo suits, and you can set up liquid locks to confine the room so that it's either full of a gas so that the bleach stone doesn't off-gas ever, or so that the bleach stone just off-gases into chlorine until it reaches the overpressure threshold. So you can just use a normal liquid lock for it like this. In this case, we're just going to put in some visco gel just to illustrate the concept. So we'll just put some visco gel here. And then what you're going to want to do... Okay. Yeah, that can unfreeze. So this conveyor rail will go up here. When you're moving the bleach stone anywhere, you want to move it within tiles so that it doesn't off-gas anywhere. So you want to cover that up as much as possible. And then what you want to do is you'll want to put in some conveyor receptacles. So what I'm going to do in this case is put them to the left of the lights. And then we'll send it down to the conveyor receptacles. Now, if you're trying to do this in your normal base, I would recommend submerging these conveyor receptacles underneath a liquid of some kind and having a slightly larger room. You could design that sort of how you want. I'm not going to elaborate on it too much here. I'm just showing you functionally what it would sort of look like. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're actually going to vacuum out this room, and we're going to have it overpressurize with the chlorine, because that will just happen fairly naturally anyways. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put in some auto sweepers, and these are very important. You want to make sure they line up with the automation ports of the building, so like this. So this is going to grab all 3 automation ports. So 2 auto sweepers in these locations can service all 5 Geotuners. And they're going to deliver the Bleach Stone to the Geotuner, so that it's hanging around as little as possible. Now, this is relevant as well, because the duplicant has to do a research errand to activate the Geotuner, and that research errand isn't generated until it runs out of data and runs out of material. Even if you are using 5 Geotuners on your Brine Geyser and maxing it out at 90 degrees C material, it's not always going to get those 5 Geotuners active. Sometimes it might be on 4 out of 5, sometimes it might be on 3 out of 5. You need to make sure that your Geotuners are set to maximum priority, so that your duplicates are always doing the errand as soon as they can, and then there aren't any obstacles. In this case, if we just let the chlorine off gas into here, it's not ideal, because it's because the dupes can't breathe the chlorine, and they're going to have to come out for oxygen occasionally. So if you're doing something like this with liquid locks and filling it with the chlorine, you probably want Atmo suits. Or you just overpressurize it with oxygen, and your duplicates will get popped eardrums. Or you can just submerge the conveyor receptacles and not deal with the off-gassing. You have a few different options, but you need to make sure your duplicates aren't manually delivering the Bleach Stone all the time. Make sure that it's usually backed up in here. Obviously, we don't have a lot of Bleach Stone in this yet because the hopper produces a relatively small amount of Bleach Stone. But it can keep, one hopper can keep up with all of these Geotuners eventually. It's just taking a while to fill them all up. And these duplicates don't have anything to do, so they're all filling out manually anyways. But you can see we vacuumed out the room, it's starting to fill with chlorine, and eventually it's going to overpressurize and stop off-gassing, which is what you want. So yeah, let's get all these Geotuners operational. But yeah, the functionality of the infinite storage does not depend on the temperature of the liquid. So long as it stays a liquid and these all stay gases and nothing is condensing or solidifying, you're not going to have any problems. Alright, so now all 5 Geotuners have been activated. They've been active at different times, so some of them have 100% data remaining, some of them only have 80% data remaining. They will often get out of sync with each other. You're not often going to have a circumstance where all 5 Geotuners deactivate at the same time, so you should usually have at least 4 active if you've got the priority set high and all the ingredients are being delivered automatically. Yeah, this maxed out brine geyser is now producing double the amount, and it's producing the brine at 90 degrees C, so this is going to be very hot. Now, it should be said, you can still use a desalinator on 90 degrees C brine. You might want to do it in a room where your duplicates are suited up, so they're not going to scald, but provided you build the desalinator out of heat-resistant materials, in this case you'd want to build it out of probably steel. The gold amalgam is going to heat up very quickly, so I wouldn't recommend using it in this case. But if you make it out of steel, it's not going to overheat. It will still process the 90 degrees C brine and the exact same flow rate. You might require more machines, because you're getting an eruption average of 5 kilograms per second now. This machine can handle 5 kilograms per second of continuous flow rate, but bear in mind it will turn off occasionally when the duplicates actually want to empty this of the salt. So now the thermosensor is activated and the brine is warm enough that it can safely be pumped into the desalinator. So it's just going to go up here. The machine is going to run. You'll see the effects over here. It's currently processing 5 kilograms per second of brine. Nominal operation. We can see the salt is building up in the machine, and it will be removed once it reaches 1 ton of storage. And the output materials are the same temperature as the input brine. So now all the clean water is coming out of here. 3.5 kilograms per second for 1 desalinator handling brine. And we're just dumping that into the environment for now, but you could send that wherever you want. So, using the desalinator on a brine geyser is still pretty efficient even when it's max geotuned. One desalinator will be enough to handle the throughput of 1 max geotuned cool salt slush geyser, so that works pretty well. You need duplicates to geotune your geyser anyways, and you're going to want to do this to double the amount of water and salt that you're going to get out of it. So it doesn't matter that your duplicate has to do an errand here occasionally. And it doesn't require advanced materials to do it this way either, which is good. But what if I told you that you don't have to use desalinator and you can actually heat up the 90 degrees C brine just past the boiling point of brine. So in practice, it's going to be 106 degrees C, because it's 3 degrees C above the evaporation point on the tooltip. And then you condense it back down to the condensation point of water, which is about 96 degrees C. And then you pump the water out with the liquid pump. So you don't actually need to use a desalinator. And it turns out that such a setup optimally, uses a similar amount of power, but also gives you a fair amount of cooling from a Thermo Aquatuner that you can use to cool your base or whatever else you want. And it doesn't even require advanced materials because it's never getting hot enough to require steel. So yeah, let's investigate this condenser design, and we'll talk about the pros and cons and how you set it up. So what we're doing to set up the brine geyser with this condenser arrangement, we've got our salt water geyser here, we're max geotuning it, and we put it in a vacuum room. We've set up a liquid lock that's full of a large amount of the brine from the geyser. So that's going to be filled up over here with bottle emptiers or whatever have you. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a Thermo Aquatuner over here, and we're going to make this out of aluminium ore, which you can find in the forest biome. And this is going to be used to heat up the brine to the point where it boils into steam at around 106 degrees C. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use a liquid pump, which can be made out of gold amalgam, to pump out the water that we can then use whatever else we want. And then all of the salt is going to be deposited in here where it boils underneath the Aquatuner. So we can just put an auto sweeper in here. This could just be made out of a heat resistant refined metal like iron. Iron is a pretty good pick for this. And we're just going to put this over here so they can cover all of these tiles where the salt water might boil. We'll put a conveyor loader. It doesn't really matter too much where we put the conveyor loader. I think what we're going to do is we're going to put it here. And again, you'll want to make this out something heat resistant like iron. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a timer sensor. So that is going to connect into the auto sweeper, and we'll set this one to green 10, red 50. So it's only picking up the salt occasionally. Because the saltwater geyser is going to continuously erupt and boil, otherwise this thing is going to be working full time grabbing very small blobs of salt. So you want this to only occasionally pick up the salt. And we'll set this to everything, because that's absolutely fine. So we'll plug all of this in. You will want to plug the Thermo Aquatuner on a separate power wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug all of this stuff in on a separate power wire. And that's going to go to a separate dev generator in this case. And then what we'll do is we're just going to set up a little bit more automation in this room. So we're going to set up a hydro sensor over here. We don't want our liquid pump to activate until there's enough water in here that you're going to pump a full load. So I typically set this to about 50 kilograms per tile. You also want water in here to help exchange heat with the condensing material. And eventually, as a result, your water is going to get pumped out at about 96 degrees C, the condensation point of the steam, which is what you want. That's the efficient way to do it. So we'll just unpause it for a sec, get rid of some of these alerts. So the other automation we're going to set up in here. So we're going to set up a pipe thermo sensor for the liquid going through the Thermo Aquatuner. We'll do our usual setup with this, but the automation is going to look slightly different. So we're going to send polluted water in here because it has a good temperature range, a low freezing point, and a high specific heat capacity. So we're going to set this thing to activate the Thermo Aquatuner if the liquid is above, say, -5 degrees. The Thermo Aquatuner cools any liquid going into it by 14 degrees C and outputs the heat into the room. So this way we're going to make sure our polluted water doesn't freeze. You can set it lower realistically, but it doesn't matter too much. So normally what I do is I plug this straight into the Aquatuner and call it a day. But there's a few other controls that we need to set up in this room to make sure this condenser works properly. So first of all, you're going to want a thermo sensor in here. If the steam is hot enough that all of the brine has boiled into steam, you don't need to pump any more heat into it. So you want to turn it off in that case. So what we'll actually do is we'll set this thermo sensor to below 106 degrees. Because 106 degrees is the point where you should have just a room full of steam. We don't want to inject excess heat into this. And then the last few sensors we're going to set up are over here. We're going to put a hydro sensor down here. We're going to put an atmo sensor over here. This room isn't going to get hot enough generally that you're going to have issues making this out of lead, so you can make the automation stuff out of lead. I don't typically do it, but this is a case where you could probably get away with it. So we're going to plug these in, and these are both going to be set to above 0. So if there's not a vacuum in here, at least one of these sensors will be active. So what we're going to do, we're going to plug these into an AND gate. So if the liquid in the pipe is warm enough to require cooling and the room isn't too hot in general, then this signal will trigger. If there is any gas or liquid in the room at all, we'll plug this into another AND gate, and this signal... Oh, we'll plug this into an OR gate. Yeah, we'll use an OR gate for once. I find it very rare that we actually use these, but this is a good case for it. So if there's either a gas or a liquid in the room, and we haven't got a vacuum, then this will activate, and then we just put an AND gate in the middle. So if all of these conditions are met, we'll rotate this one. So if all of these conditions are met, then the Thermo Aquatuner will run. And that will stop the Thermo Aquatuner from breaking. Now, you don't need to make it out of steel, because the room isn't going to get hotter than about 110 degrees max. And the Thermo Aquatuner has an overheat temperature of 125 degrees C by default. So I recommend making this out of aluminium ore, because it's a fairly conductive material that you have easy access to, and it requires a lot of material. Don't make it out of gold amalgam, because the gold amalgam is not a very good conductor. It might have an overheat temperature of 175 degrees C, but your Aquatuner might reach that temperature before it dissipates the heat into the brine and the steam. Steam is not a good conductor at all, and you don't really want any oil in here. You just want it to be the liquid from the geyser in here. You don't need to go and grab oil for this build. So that's all of the automation set up like this. Next, what are we going to do? Let's actually set up the piping. So this is going to be our usual insulated pipe. Make it out of igneous rock. It's a commonly available material. If you have something better, feel free to use it, but it's not super important. We're going to put a bridge over here. Again, make this out of igneous rock. And then the pipe is going to go up from the Thermo Aquatuner onto the bridge. And because the loop will start at the Thermo Aquatuner, this means the loop will prioritize cooled liquid from the Aquatuner over recirculating the liquid. So it's always going to try and cool the system. Now, we'll leave this liquid up here again. And I'll just get rid of this stuff for now because we're not actually using it. Okay, so now we have our insulated liquid pipe here. We're going to put another bridge on here, and this is where we're going to lead in our polluted water from whatever your source is. And that's going to come down here. We're just going to... Let's just lead it down here. We'll put a bridge up here going through this insulated tile that's separating the boiling room and the condensing room. And then that's just going to go into your liquid source. So in this case, we're just going to use a dev pump, but any polluted water source will do. And because that output is immediately after the output from the recirculation, this means the loop shouldn't overfill with polluted water. So that's going to go up here. We're going to run it in insulated pipe through here. We're actually going to make this room one layer shorter with the tiles. So it's going to be a 3-high room. And this is important because what we're actually going to do is, instead of using insulated tiles over here, we're going to use conductive aluminium tiles. So this here is going to be actively cooled, and that by the Thermo Aquatuner, and that is going to act to condense any steam that wanders over this wall into this room. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to make the rest of this aluminium tiles so that it conducts heat into the environment. And you need to cool the environment by a certain amount to generate the heat to boil this. So you need to be continually dumping heat into the environment, but that's usually not really a problem. You're using the same amount of power that you would use from using the desalinator anyways. So you're just getting the net cooling out, which is usually a plus. So we're going to send the insulated pipe through here, and then we're going to have some conductive radiant aluminium pipe going up here. We're then going to send it back down here, and it's going to conduct into this condensing element. And then we'll just send it over here, and that can come out this way. So the water from this pump, we're just going to pump it over here and dump it over here. and we're just going to set up a bridge here. With liquid bridges, and bridges in general with insulated tiles, you always want to make sure the bridge starts and ends in the tile. If you have a bridge that's bypassing an insulated tile, it is going to leak heat between the two rooms, so that's a big no. So we're going to put the bridge here, and then the coolant loop is going to come down this way and recirculate. So actually what we should do in this case... Sorry, was indecisive now, not so sure. We'll have it feed in from under here. Yes, that's best because that means the coolant is exchanging as little heat with the environment as possible. And then we'll put in a bridge here. Because the bridge is ending in insulated tile, there's no heat transfer from the bridge. So it's not going to cause any issues doing it like this. And then that's our complete loop. So now we can just unpause it, and the polluted water is going to load on. We'll speed through it for a minute. So it loads on here. The polluted water starts going around, starts actively cooling the environment. It's going to affect the temperature of this condensing element. Then it's going to circulate through here. So in this case, we have some salt water in here. So the Thermo Aquatuner is going to start running, and it's going to start boiling the brine. And this thing generates 585.06 kDTUs of heat. That's 140 times the specific heat capacity of the liquid you're using in the coolant loop. So now it's all recirculating along here. You can remove this pipe if you want, but in this case, the polluted water isn't going to burst in the room because of the steam temperature. The steam isn't going to get hot enough to do that. So you can just leave it in and there's no problem. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put in some temperature plates because we want to make sure that the steam exchanges temperature with everything evenly. It doesn't matter too much what you make these out of. Granite will do. So just put some granite temperature plates down here. Because steam just does not have a very good thermal conductivity whatsoever. The last thing we'll do is actually set up the conveyor rail. So up to this point, you can access this room. Oh, whoops! I shouldn't have done that. So up to this point, you can access this room via the liquid lock by going in here and having this tile removed here. You can access all of this. Again, you could remove this tile here as well if you want. But eventually you're going to want to seal this off properly. So we'll seal this here. And then what we'll do is we'll set up our conveyor rail. So that is going to go underneath here. It's going to go through your aluminium conductive tiles. This is very important because the solid salt is not a very good conductor. And running it through metal tiles on a conveyor rail is the quickest way to reasonably conduct the heat out. So then what we're going to do is we're going to, I don't know, let's say in this case we'll just put the conveyor thermosensor and shut off over here. So that sensor is going to go here, shut off is going to go here. I could have put it over here actually, that's kind of funny. So what we'll do is we'll set this to dump the material if it's below, say, 25 degrees C. We'll hook this up with some automation and a power wire again. That's absolutely fine. There you go, that can... Oh, I removed the other dev generator. Excellent. Again, we'll keep those lines separate. So if the material is too hot, we'll send it back through the conveyor loop. And we're just going to send it... I think in this case what actually makes sense is for us to send it this way. Again, your exact setup here will vary. It will vary based on what you're trying to cool. But make sure that you run your conveyor rail through your element that is being actively cooled by the Thermo Aquatuner. Because the salt is going to be hot. It's going to come out at 106 degrees C. So we'll set up the bridge here. And then what we'll do is we'll just set up another bridge here. So that the output is immediately next to the output of the conveyor loader. And this will prevent the solid packets from getting confused on the conveyor line. So it's going to do that, and then if the material is actually cold enough, we'll just dump it out into the environment. So there we go. I believe that is actually the whole condenser setup. It's not super complicated, and it doesn't require advanced materials. So it's relatively practical to build early on. You do just need some aluminium. You want to refine it with a metal refinery, and you'll want a fair bit so you can make the Thermo Aquatuner. And we'll come back when this brine has been heated up. We've dumped the data banks in the conveyor loader. Excellent. So, we're now at the point where the brine is more or less at the boiling point, and we're starting to see some steam getting generated. It's currently exchanging heat with the rest of the environment in the room, just the objects slowly heating up. You'll see some water has condensed here. Now, because the steam is not a very conductor, what I typically like to do is put an aluminium conductive wire segment on this wire. And you can remove the actual wire as a result. But this will conduct heat into the water pretty quickly. You can see it's spiked up in temperature right now. So this will make sure it boils any liquids that end up in this gap. So now the steam is starting to creep into this room where this aluminium tile is getting cooled down by the Thermo Aquatuner. The temperature has become high enough that this is turned off. So it's going to turn on and off intermittently. The steam is condensing in the room and eventually it's going to get pumped out. Now, we activated this setup while there wasn't a lot of brine in the room, but you can see it's making sure that nothing overheats. We are getting the water out. We're not dumping any excess heat into the brine to boil it. It is all sorting itself out. And we'll come back once the geyser starts erupting again. So I'll see you in a minute. So the brine geyser is about to erupt again. It is still max Geotune, so it's going to come out at 90 degrees C. The setup is designed so that it will generate enough heat to boil this, even if it gets only 4 out of 5 Geotuners occasionally. Because you're never going to always have 5 Geotuners up, because someone's going to have to do the research errand at some point. It doesn't get generated until the geyser runs out of data. But this will be able to generate enough heat to boil it even in those circumstances occasionally. So this machine is fairly stable. It doesn't break. I've tested it for quite a while. It hasn't broken yet. We've already got some water in here from earlier. But now, if we speed it up, this is going to start erupting. So now you can see the brine is coming out. Obviously, it's not quite at boiling point yet, so the room will fill with liquid quickly. But then this thermo sensor will decrease in temperature. The Thermo Aquatuner will start running again. You'll see the liquid is getting cooled, and we're cooling the environment by a fair bit, just with that pipe. Obviously, the condenser room itself is hot. And the water in here is gradually heating up. This area is quite cold in general, so and because there's a relatively low amount of water in here, it's lost a fair bit of its heat to start with. But as more and more steam is produced, this will reach sort of 96 degrees C, and the less heat is going to get wasted on that. So you will end up with hot water around 96 degrees C coming out of this in the end. So yeah, in this case what we have is we have a little bit of water in this room that's turning into steam and then condensing on these items and then uncondensing. You'll see this pattern happening occasionally. This is nothing to worry about. It is pretty cool looking though. And then we'll speed up again. So you can see in terms of mass, we have about 400 kilograms per tile of brine in here. The eruption average value is fairly normal for this geyser. So we'll just wait for this to finish erupting. And then we'll see how much is left. So there's about 500 kilograms per tile of brine in this room. And there's a little bit of water on the top, which is going to boil first. Thermo Aquatuner is going to keep running. This water is going to keep getting cooler. If you don't have enough stuff to get cooled down to dump the heat into from this, then you're not going to successfully boil this, and this room will overfill with brine. But you can find stuff to cool down. It's fine. I believe in you. You can do it. It's a relatively small amount of cooling that's required. This won't be running continuously unless you're not geotuning it max like you should be to get it to 90 degrees C. So now you can see the brine is at the point where it's starting to boil into steam en masse. Most of the salt has ended up here in this case, but the auto sweeper can cover the whole room in the green rectangle, so that's not an issue. The water is rapidly approaching 96 degrees, which is suggesting that only a small amount of the heat is being lost from it condensing over here. You can see this metal tile here is quite hot, while this metal tile that's actively cooling the base stays cold. That is intentional. So you'll see the liquid comes in here at about 26 degrees, it's coming out of here at about 18 degrees, and then it's heating up in here. But that's absolutely fine. Now you can see all the brine has boiled, we've got all the salt out. That salt is being run through the conveyor rail, and it doesn't exchange too much heat into the environment when it's not on the metal tiles. So you're not losing a huge amount of heat while the salt is on the conveyor line here. It's only when it's going through the tiles that it really matters too much. And again, when it's going through the tiles, it's interfacing with the coolant pipe as well. And the overall amount of heat produced by the salt that you're cooling down is less than the net amount of cooling you have from the Thermo Aquatuner. So you can do it like this and it's not going to overheat your base. But it might take a while, but eventually we'll get some salt in here that is below the target temperature. You can see it's alternating between 100 degree packets and 30 degree packets now. We're pumping the water out of here fairly quickly. And overall, it's been fairly neat and not very messy. So yeah, that's the build. It works pretty well. I think there is some justification for using it over a desalinator. You do get a little bit of net cooling out of it. You do get to cool down the salt as well, because if you just use a desalinator on 90 degrees C brine, you're getting the 90 degrees C salt out as well. And you're going to have to get rid of that heat somewhere. It should be noted that using a desalinator in general deletes a little bit of heat because of the specific heat capacities of the materials. It's typically somewhere between 4 and 8%, depending on whether it's brine or salt water. So it's not a huge amount, but there is a little bit of heat deletion from that. But the same process happens when you actually boil it. It's just because of the specific heat capacities of the materials. It's not inherent to the desalinator. So you still have a net cooling advantage using the condenser. And if it's set up correctly, you shouldn't have any issues. You can see the metal tile is all still cool. So, that's the brine geyser. Now, you might think, what if I generate even more heat and we get the steam up to 125 degrees, we can run steam turbines. Now, you can do this, but you need to inject a lot of heat into here with Thermo Aquatuners. And for the average cool Salt Slush Geyser max Geotune, you're going to need 2 Thermo Aquatuners to generate enough heat to get it to steam turbine range. And they're going to have to continuously be dumping their cooling into the environment to generate that much heat. So I would only recommend using steam turbines to handle a max Geotuned brine geyser when you've got something that you need to cool down vastly. Like, say, you're trying to cool water from somewhere else to the range where it's you can feed it to plants. But in that case, I would argue you should just perhaps not Geotune this and use the cool brine. But there may be other cases where you are going to consume a massive amount of coolant and you can justify using those steam turbines. But overall, the way the math shakes out is even with the steam turbines, you're consuming the same amount of power overall. You're not really getting a benefit on power. You're just generating a massive amount of cooling. And if you can't offload that cooling, you're not going to get enough heat to run it through the steam turbines, and the room is just going to fill with steam to the point where the geyser stops erupting at 500 kilograms per tile of pressure. So typically, I would recommend just using a condenser for this. You also need steel and plastic to build components that can handle the steam temperature, steam turbine temperatures, and to actually build the steam turbines. And at that point, you'll probably need an oil liquid lock as well to get things to work. So you can do it, but I think using a condenser is generally better for a brine geyser. However, steam turbines are definitely better for handling saltwater geysers, which is what we're going to talk about next. So let's hop on over to a different geyser. So we're back. Ada has finished analyzing this new saltwater geyser. So this one is less spiky than the brine geyser. It's producing 9.2 kilograms per second at 95 degrees C. The eruption average is 4.71 kilograms per second, which is a bit lower than the average of 5 kilograms per second. But the total average is 3.3 kilograms, which is slightly higher than the 3 kilograms per second that is typical of these geysers. So it normally comes out at 95 degrees C. So what you can do with this is you can use a condenser similar to this, or you can even just use a desalinator to handle the salt water from a non-Geotune saltwater geyser just fine. It's more or less exactly the same setup, except you're getting less salt out of it because the salt water is only 7% salt. So the desalinator is going to be less efficient overall, and there's also less real benefit from doing it with the condenser. So what I would suggest that you do most of the time with these is that you set up the steam turbines and geotune it. Because if we max geotune it, we can get it all the way up to 195 degrees C, at which point you're practically getting maximum power out of your steam turbines. And you can get an insane amount of power and water and even salt out of this for free. So that's what we're going to do. So to handle this, first of all, let's get Ada out of here. Ada can come and geotune this geyser now. I set up another room, so we're just geotuning both geysers separately. So Ada's going to come sort that out. What you'll want to do is you'll want to set up a 25 tile wide room, because we're going to use 5 steam turbines for this. So we're going to use insulated tiles for this again. We'll just do, say, this many. And you can make it 3 tiles tall again. That's absolutely fine. And then, let's see. I think that should be enough. Yeah, so that's a 25 by 3 tile zone. So that's what we're looking for. You are going to want to vacuum this out again, as we did for the previous room. Make sure you don't have any oxygen in your steam turbine room. And we can put some temperature plates in here as well. Again, granite will do perfectly fine for this. It's just because steam is not a very good conductor. And when you're geotuning this, it is going to come out as just steam and salt. Straight out of the geyser. And the overpressurizing threshold is still 500 kilograms per tile. So it's pretty good. So we've got that set up. We're going to remove this. And then we're going to put our 5 steam turbines on top. Now this isn't geotuned yet, so that's why it's coming out as liquid, which is fine. You will probably want to put a little bit of oil on the bottom, just to add some extra conductivity to this with the steam. So let's say about 1 kilogram per tile of oil in here on the bottom. Give some extra conductivity, make things a little bit easier. You'll see the salt water is just coming out and spreading out over the oil now. It's absolutely fine. Steam turbines will go up here. You can make these out of lead, no issues. You will need some plastic for making the turbines. We're going to fit 5 of them here. So you can see we're turning on the Geotuners. Now, the eruption average ungeotuned is usually 5 kilograms per second. At max geotuning, that's going to be doubled to about 10 kilograms per second. And in this case, for this geyser, it's 9.4 kilograms per second. So you'll usually need 5 turbines. But if this eruption average is higher than 5 kilograms per second ungeotuned, you may need 6 turbines. However, there's also a lot of room in here to actually store the steam. So there is some variability on this. Now, you can see this is geotuned once, so now the salt water is coming out 115 degrees. Because the room is still colder in general, we're still getting the salt water coming out of here. It's not immediately turning into steam, because it's conducting with the oil and heating everything up. But that will change as we add more and more geotuners and the salt water gets hotter and hotter. So, what we're going to want to do with this room as well, we're going to want to set up our Thermo Aquatuner. This is going to have to be made out of steel in this case. So we're going to put this here. The room is going to get to about 200 degrees C on average, so it does need to be steel. Gold amalgam definitely won't cut it, even with the oil for conductivity. We're going to put in our pipe with the bypass, as we did before. So that's just going to be insulated pipe. Again, it doesn't really matter too much what material you use. We're going to put in the liquid pipe thermosensor. Don't make anything in this room out of lead. I would avoid it in this room. So we're going to put our pipe thermosensor here. That is going to be set to send a green still if it's above -5 or whatever the previous one was set to. It's the same deal here. We are also going to put a Atmos sensor in here. So this is just going to detect whether we have any steam in here. And that we're just going to set to a very low amount, say 100 grams pressure. And then that's going to activate this. Now, in this initial phase where we've still got some salt water here, you might not want to plug this in immediately. We're going to have an AND gate here. And that is going to hook up here to this sensor and then to the Thermo Aquatuner. But we're just going to leave it disconnected while the salt water is still getting to the point where it's going to boil and we're still activating all these geotuners. So that's going to go there. we're going to put in our auto sweeper and our conveyor loader. These have to be made out of steel in this case. Okay, so now you can see the salt water is starting to boil. The oil in this case has all been pushed to the corners by the reaction, which is pretty interesting, but it will flow back once all the salt water boils. You could get some weird shenanigans going, but nothing is breaking. This is all fine. So we will make this out of steel. We'll put this auto sweeper directly above the geyser, and then we'll put a conveyor loader over here. Again, this has to be made out of steel. So we'll just put it facing, say, this way. And again, we'll want to hook up a timer sensor, and that's going to go to the auto sweeper. So I could never spot these. So that's going to go over here, and that is going to turn on for 10 seconds every minute. And again, that's just because the salt water is going to continuously boil. Now, in this case, the salt water has moved out over here, and it's boiling over here, but normally it will boil right by the geyser. If you really feel like it, you could set up more auto sweepers and conveyor loaders in these regions to capture everything, but it's usually not going to be super necessary. It's just happened in this case because all the oil got pushed into the corner somehow, which is very amusing. So the oil has flowed back. You're probably going to want to pour a little bit more in than I did, because in this case the oil got pushed out and it's so viscous it's not falling back. So let's put in 10 kilograms per tile instead of 1 kilogram per tile. And again, this is just to form a nice conductive layer. So that's going to go in here. We're going to plug this all into some wires. You'll want to sort out power transformers or heavy watt wire for your steam turbines, but I'm just going to plug everything together for now just to illustrate the build and to show you that it works and that it is self-powered when you're geotuning the geyser by the max amount. So that's all going to plug in there. You can also put some batteries in here. You can make these out of steel. Jumbo batteries would be good. And there is room for you to fit 9 jumbo batteries in here, and these can store the power from the steam turbines. So we'll just plug that all in here. Again, don't use any lead for this, just in case the Thermo Aquatuner runs while you're building it and there's not enough steam in here. But if you're confident, you can use lead. We'll set this to everything. And then eventually what will happen is the steam will get hot enough that the steam turbines will activate and everything will start moving. So, in terms of getting the water out, let's actually continue the cooling loop. So what we'll do, we'll continue to extend this pipe up here. Again, we're going to put another bridge over here. We're just going to come back down here. And we're going to put a bridge. Yeah, we're going to leave it like that. We're going to put a liquid dev pump over here. This is going to be our polluted water source. Again, we're going to use polluted water because it has a good temperature range and a good specific heat capacity, and that's what you want to see. So we'll just plug that in here. And then in terms of the actual coolant loop, once it's loaded on, send it up here, and we'll have a load of radiant pipe. This could be aluminium. Again, that's a very conductive material. And what we're going to do is we're going to send it up here, so it's covering the steam turbines as much as possible. And it's going into the tile above the steam turbines, because we're going to do something special with that. So we're just going to snake it around here. I find this very satisfying. It looks a lot like spaghetti. It's yellow as well. So that's going to go in here, and then we're going to send that back down here. And then what we'll do is we'll send that coolant pipe all the way back around the insulated tile. We can bridge this through the insulated tile, and then again, we can just hook it back up to the Thermo Aquatuner like this, and it's fairly straightforward. Now, the water for the steam turbines is going to come out at 95 degrees C. So we're going to take that pipe and we're going to put it over here. That's going to be insulated. We're not going to have it interact with anything, and we're just going to dump all the water over here. And that is the pipe network. So let's get this filled up, and we'll see what it looks like when it's all filled up. So now the coolant loop is all filled up with the polluted water. You'll see that it will stop loading on from the polluted water source once it's done. And you are going to want to immediately remove this pipe because eventually this polluted water will exchange heat with the steam and it will burst. It will take absolutely ages, but it will eventually happen. So you might as well go ahead and do it. So we'll just remove that. It doesn't matter too much if you get some polluted water in here, That's going to boil eventually. If there's plenty of steam in here, it's not going to off gas. And this geyser is going to erupt in a minute at 195 degrees C, so that's not really going to matter too much. So we'll just let it crack on with that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the conveyor loop in. So again, the conveyor rail is going to come out here. It doesn't matter specifically too much what you do with this, but what we are going to do is we're going to put some conductive tiles up here that we're going to cool down with the coolant loop as well. And we'll make these out of aluminium. In this case, I'm just going to put them here. You can cool down whatever you want with this, but it's important to have some conductive tiles somewhere so that you're exchanging the heat out of the salt. Because again, the salt is going to be coming out of this at 195 degrees C. It's going to be very hot. So the conveyor rail, we'll send it around here. I'm actually going to put some more... tile there. That's actually fine. So conveyor rail can go up here. It goes sort of along like this. It's mostly going to be exchanging heat through the conductive tiles, but we're also going to run it past the steam turbines because that area is being cooled anyways. It doesn't matter too much what material you make the conveyor rail out of. And then that's going to go down here. So then what we're going to do at this point, let's take it off here. We'll put our conveyor rail thermosensor here. And we'll put our shutoff over here. So again, we're going to set this to dump the material into the environment if it's below 25 degrees C. And then we'll set up some automation wire for that. Again, we'll just plug this all into the same wire to illustrate the build. And if the material is still too hot, it's going to come down here and we're going to keep cooling it. And what we'll do is we'll actually set up... I think what we'll actually do is we'll set up a bridge here. And then what we'll do is instead of leading it in here, we're going to bring the material up through here. The steam is a bad conductor, so again, the rail isn't going to do too much conducting while it's up here. In the steam room. So this should be fine. We can actually just do it like this as well. It's probably a bit clearer visually what's going on. Most of the conduction of the solid is going to be going through these solid tiles out of the aluminium. So we can hook this up as well. You can see the saltwater geyser is erupting now, so the liquid is getting boiled. It's taking a little while for this polluted water to get up to heat because, again, the temperature exchange is not super high, and the hot steam is already being taken out by the steam turbines. It will take a little bit of time for this build to get up to snuff, but we're already generating some power and filling the batteries. The Thermo Aquatuner is currently disabled because we haven't plugged this in yet. So we can plug this back in whenever we want to. Now we've got a room full of gas. It makes sense to do that. So this is going to start running again. It's going to start cooling all of the stuff up here, and it's going to start heating up the steam even more. So we're going to boil all the polluted water. All the polluted water is boiled now. We haven't ended up with any polluted oxygen here, so that's not an issue. And then once the material is cold enough, we're just going to dump it over here into the environment. And we're going to put some temperature plates behind these steam turbines. So that's going to help to cool everything. In this case, what we'll do is we'll make them out of granite, and we'll build them along with where the metal tiles are. You've got to make sure that they don't interface with the insulated tiles, because otherwise it's going to conduct heat into the insulated tile, and that's not what you want. So now this is going to work harder to actively cool everything. You'll see the water is still coming out of this pipe at about 94.8 degrees C. So this is staying nice and hot. Again, you're probably going to use that for hot water outputs like electrolyzers for oxygen or oil wells for more oil. And then the steam is all coming in here. The power is increasing. This build is now definitely self-powered. These batteries are going to start filling quite quickly. We're getting 18.4 kilograms per second of 195 degrees C steam and salt. If we look at the conveyor rail, let's see, conveyor rail blocked. It's because I didn't connect this. I always forget to do that. Don't forget to do that. So let's have a look at this overlay. So this salt is coming in around 156 degrees C. This was just some salt from earlier when it wasn't max geotuned. It's exchanging a little bit of heat with the environment out here, but most of the heat exchange is going to go on when it goes into the metal tiles. So you can see it starts to cool down immediately when it's in these metal tiles. So, to be honest, you can just run the conveyor rail through the metal tiles and you'll still get the same overall amount of cooling. I mean, in this case, even with the temperature plates, there's not that much transfer going on. It's better than nothing, but most of the conductivity is just going through these metal tiles. So that's very important. But again, this will cool down and eventually it'll get to the point where it's cool enough to dump the salt back into the environment. And in terms of the maths and how this works, these do need to be actively cooled because they're going to be handling 200 degrees C steam, more or less, once you factor in all the heat from the geyser, the Aquatuner, and the batteries. But the active cooling from the Thermo Aquatuner is enough to actively cool 5 steam turbines at the same time. But yeah, that's the build. It's fairly straightforward, actually, compared to the last one. You just need to run the Geotuners, and with the Salt Water Geyser, again, because it's 7% salt, you do get slightly less Bleach Stone out of it than you put into the Geotuners. But it's worth doing overall. The net amount is very similar. You get a large amount of power. You have enough cooling with the Aquatuner to keep everything nice and cool. And you get a large amount of water out. And you're also getting all of the sand from crushing the salt. You're still getting 2/3 of that salt out as sand that you can use as your filtration medium. So it's very good, and to be honest, if you can get the advanced resources to set this up in the early game, this is going to give you everything you need to prosper, really. Very, very useful build. One more thing I would say is I wouldn't recommend using a condenser with one Geotuner on a saltwater geyser, like we did with the brine geyser, because A, the liquid is going to come out at 115 degrees C, so you're going to have to cool it by quite a bit more with your Thermo Aquatuner. B, if that geotuning errand is missed, it's going to come out as salt water rather than steam. I would just suggest max geotuning these, or not geotuning them at all, and using a desalinator. By the way, I forgot to mention something. You can also use salt to geotune chlorine vents, and this is actually pretty interesting because geotuning a chlorine vent uses 25 grams per second of salt to produce an extra 21 grams per second of chlorine on average. And if you have squeaky puffs, they can turn 95% of that chlorine into bleach stone. So the overall efficiency of that for generating bleach stone from salt is way higher than for a bleach stone hopper. And it doesn't take any power apart from whatever you're using to pump the chlorine gas into the puff branch. So depending on what your circumstances are, if you have chlorine vents, you can significantly increase the amount of bleach stone in your hands for geotuning all of your saltwater and brine geysers. Just something to think about. Again, it's getting a bit complicated to talk about in this video, but definitely consider it if you have chlorine vents and if you have saltwater geysers. But yeah, that's the build, and those are my thoughts on saltwater geysers and cool salt slush geysers. Very interesting geysers. The brine geysers can cool your base early on, and late game you can geotune them for massive amounts of bleach stone that you can use to geotune the rest of your water sources. You get a very large amount of sand from them as well, and you can either desalinate them, condense them, or boil them to the point where you're using steam turbines. And with the saltwater geyser, it's very similar, except in this case, you're mostly going to geotune these to get the maximum amount of water out you can, to get the maximum amount of power for powering everything else in your base, and enough bleach stone to keep everything operating. But yeah, let me know in the comments how you guys like to use saltwater geysers and brine geysers in your runs. I'm very interested to see what you guys use them for. Do you have any interesting water weed setups? I haven't really talked about that at all, and I don't think I'm going to. But yeah, thanks for watching. We do stream on Twitch. We play Oxygen Not Included on Mondays and Tuesdays, 7:30 to 10:30 British time. We upload plenty of videos to YouTube. All the VODs go on YouTube. We also do tier lists and more build guides like this. And the Discord is a great place to hang out and share builds and memes and be salty. But yeah, thanks very much for hanging out. I'll see you soon. Take it away, Whiskers. Bye for now.
Whisker sends thanks to the following Twitch subscribers and YouTube members. 999999999, Cyber Dinier, FRD. Grey Area, Jess Jack, Lumen, Kujia Jizia, Neo Deus Machina, Sinister Plank, Static Icarus, Sweet Danger Kitty, Tesla Kitty, The Back Guy, The Max Not Binary, Uglavisk, and Who Knows Yo.